3D Lab guest sessions are online technical talks or collaborative workshops with external practitioners or our in-house technical team. These sessions are hosted by the 3D Lab based at Wimbledon College of Arts, UAL. We seek conversations that reflect the richness of thinking through making, technical research and development, and practical learning and teaching. We aim to explore the making literacies that underpin making practice, and in doing so develop a learning resource within the context of performance and beyond. For previous sessions and to join our mailing list, please visit wca3dlab.myblock.arts.ac.uk. So today we've got Oscar Peters very generously joining us from Amsterdam. And Oscar is a close friend of Jonathan Armistead, who's our technical manager across CCW, Camberwell, Chelsea and Wimbledon. Jonathan's going to join us in discussion with Oscar once Oscar has shared some of his work with us, just because Jonathan knows his work quite closely, and often I have lived or experienced Oscar's work through my WhatsApp with Jonathan whilst he's walking around Oscar's shows in Amsterdam and around the place. They also have a relationship going back to when they used to work together in Pittsburgh, and I'm sure we can talk about that as well. It's with great delight that I can welcome Oscar. Oscar's practice just traverses so many interesting disciplines and so many different sensibilities and skill bases. He's not only a kinetic artist, but he also kind of lives in these really interesting spaces as an academic at the Rietveld Academy, as well as working as a technician as well. So we, as technicians, we are really interested in having this chat with Oscar, and as well as talking from the 3D Lab that is based within a now developing immersive performance environment. We're keen to talk to Oscar about sort of the performativity of material and how he finds that, and maybe he talks a lot about social engineering, so just this kind of community aspect that happens on the periphery of making and how making facilitates that. So there's lots of interesting stuff that we can dive in today, but I'm sure Oscar will take us down some wonderful paths of thought and provocations. So without further ado, I'd love to kind of just welcome Oscar.
Thank you. What an incredibly wonderful introduction. It's really so nice to hear these things about about me. Thank you. Like Wimbledon College of the Arts, welcome to listen to me talk. I want to thank you, Ashley Pearson and Jonathan Armistead, obviously, for inviting me to come talk. So I prepared a couple of things, and I'm going to share my screen in a minute. And I'm going to take you through my art practice from I think from right around the time from when I graduated undergrad to right up till about now. But I first wanted to start like this, where you can see my face and then you have a voice with the face, or you know. So I think without further ado, I'm just because maybe it's a lot, maybe not. We'll see where I'm going to go and how this is going to go and how quickly I go through my work. I think Ash already said that if you have questions, just put them in the tab and we'll do the Q&A later. And I'm happy to answer any type of question, really. So let's go with this. Can you all see this? I hope so. I like big things. I like building big kinetic sculptures. Just I think because of the materiality of it, or because of the size of it. And I'm a fairly large man. I am close to 190, and I weigh, I don't know, like 140 kilos. I'm big. So in the things that I like to build are also big, so it's like the kind of like representation of my body, of my being, but then what I can physically do into sculptures. And this is a very early thing where I built this massive trap, which is in fact a super useless piece of engineering. It doesn't work. It looks fearsome, but it also looks like a kind of like a sad dinosaur. So it's like I like building these things that are intimidating and scary, or have this idea of violence. I much prefer simulated violence than real violence, because it also it will always have something funny to it. And that so this is all fairly early works, and one of the very early works is a piece I did with one of my best friends called Zoro Feigl. I think the link to his website is in the section somewhere over there. And we've been collaborating since we met in art school, I think in 2006. And one of the first things we did together is, like you can see in this picture, there's all this the pink fluffiness that's all cotton candy. So at one point we got together, brainstormed, and we're like, we need to build this cotton candy tornado machine. And it's a very, very simple machine. We got we rented a cotton candy machine, took it apart to see how it works, figured out the mechanism, and then just reverse engineered it so we could make the whole thing ourselves. And this was really fun. I mean, this was really, really, really fun to do. It was terrifying because the thing heats up to 300 degrees Celsius, and it spins around at 1200 RPMs. And as you can see, like, people really like this. They become kids and they really want to grab this cotton candy, this candy floss from the air. And at other venues, like at openings, people always drink and they get too excited and they want to just grab the candy right from the spinning disc, which was always terrified me. But this was really, really fun to build. Just to start with, this is the first time we've actually ever managed to create. It's a video, like the only footage I have from the first time we managed to make candy floss. So that's like that's a neat little video that not everybody gets to see. But the thing that I loved about that was that it was really, really fun and exciting, and it really changed an audience from like a very serious art crowd to really excited kids, because everybody just wanted to be part of it. And it was it was the first time I realized that art can be fun and lighthearted, but for me at the same time, with having built this machine and having to trust my skills in metalworking, it was also terrifying to me. And I took that notion a step further, where I wanted to have a machine that I thought was fun, and that was also very, very clearly terrifying, and very clearly very dangerous. Like with the cotton candy machine, it was very, very the danger was very present, but it was very clear. And so I wanted to do the opposite, where it's insanely present and very obvious. And there's a slot right here at the base. You put the coin in, and it's an electric chainsaw. And as soon as you put the coin in, this electric chainsaw, the chain starts spinning, and it's it's potentially lethal. And this was somewhat hard to exhibit, as you can imagine, because it it really played with your audience, and that's one of the aspects I really, really enjoyed of it, where it's another form of audience manipulation, where it's you build this thing and you make it very clear in its outward appearance, like what it is, what it will do, and it still makes you wonder, will it actually work? If I put that coin in, will it actually start spinning, and will it actually, could I actually get hurt? And I think for me that it was really fun and exciting to have, or to leave that question to the audience, where they could be they could actually put money in it. So those kind of things kind of really excite me. Like to have these like very visceral bodily reactions. So I'm gonna backtrack a little bit. And there's this giant self-portrait which is almost as tall as I am, and you can see by its eyes that it's crying, and it's crying mustard, really really sharp, I think French mustard. But the smell of the mustard is so strong when you enter this room that you start crying yourself. So um, it's this like bodily reaction that I got really really interested in fairly early on. Um, and um, Around that same time when I was doing these very bodily things, I moved, or I had already lived in San Francisco and got introduced to uh, Jill Miller, who was a teacher at the San Francisco Art Institute at the time, and she gave me a wonderful assignment at one point where I had to, or the whole class, we all had to be someone else for spring break. For like, we wouldn't see each other for 3 weeks, and Jill goes, Oscar, you're going to be a bodybuilder for the next 3 weeks, and at the end you're giving a presentation. And it was, for me, it was the first time where I was like, wow, can this also be art? So I got myself a personal trainer, got into bodybuilding, really, got the fake spray tan, a buzz cut, no cut, no beard, and I gave a presentation in this tiny, what do you call it, speedo, on stage, doing several poses on the importance of looking good, and it kind of opened up a lot of ideas or possibilities on what art can be and how you can use your body as part of an artwork. And it's one of the things I still struggle with, or I find very interesting, and I don't always have a lot of answers to. So when I moved to Pittsburgh in 2006 to get a master's degree at Carnegie Mellon University, also where I met Jonathan, um, I really wanted to be that quintessential, like a stereotypical American male. Like I was born in 1981, so I grew up in like late 80s, early 90s with a lot of these like American, like what is that, Reagan era, macho man, movie heroes, the Schwarzenegger, the Stallones, and this whole idea of what a man should be, which is a really antiquated and weird um, idea. But growing up, I just wanted to have a pickup truck and a gun. And moving to Pittsburgh, I realized this is like the image you see now. This is this is what people look like, and I go like, wow, and so I did this whole transformation of myself, where I kind of became this redneck um, guy with all the insignia of what these more right-wing people would wear. And and that's the thing, like, it really, me growing up in Amsterdam or in the Netherlands and not really fully understanding all these nuances and all these things, I'm very naive in these things. So me transforming into this really opened my eyes in what you can do and how people perceive you and perceive you and your body. And I didn't look like this for very long. I maybe looked like this for maybe 3 weeks before I had to stop this, because I didn't like the way people treated me. I didn't like the way people saw me within that society as this horrible, great white hunter. We can get back into that later on, but let's move on to like different, more to me more fun stuff. Um, we can go back to those. I just want to talk a little bit more about machines. Um, as I really like I just really like building things. I like the materiality of it. I like making things work. I like this whole idea of chance in this case. Like, whereas with the chainsaw machine, like you're putting yourself a chance, and now In this piece, I really just wanted to have these balls go, these heavy bowling balls just being shot through the room. And there's always this idea, it's like, are they going to hit? Are they going to hit each other? What's going to happen? And what's going to happen then? And it's much more meditative piece than I thought it would be. I imagined it would be slightly more violent. And it turned out to be like a much more audience participation in this, where like if and when something went wrong, people would just put the balls back in. As you can see now, they actually do hit, and sometimes they won't hit for 30 minutes. Sometimes they will hit within 30 seconds. So it's one of those pieces that just kind of excite me. I'm going to go back to like the chainsaw machine, like that whole idea of like choice. This whole idea of choice in as an audience member. Having to put the coin in the coin slot and making the conscious decision of putting yourself in danger. I want to take that element out of it and just have this piece with 20 baseball bats on an axle that just spins around at random intervals. I just wanted to have that in the space, and the space is fairly small. You go into this thing, into this room, the sculpture isn't on yet. And then it just turns on, and it gives off a breeze, like you feel the air, what do you call it, the air displacement, and it's terrifying. It's so again, a very immediate bodily reaction. And also here, this is a piece I did also in America, where it's just kind of my portrait of what I felt America was like, where it's, you know, I'm ghost riding the whip. This was my car with eagles painted on the side and an American shield on the hood, but it's an old beat up Buick, and it's driving circles in the parking lot. I tied the wheel, put it in drive, and got out of the car, and we did a series of poses on top of the car. And as you notice, it's a vast like parking lot with only handicap parking everywhere as far as the eye can see. So this is my America. And then I got into the roller coaster idea. I'm a big fan of movies in general. I love horror movies. I love action adventure movies. Like this is very much for me. It's like Indiana Jones. It's that scene where he gets chased by this boulder and all these practical effects you used to see in movies. So I like that whole idea of practical effects. I really love. So this is a 2-meter diameter ball moon that just gets lifted up and does its cycle, and it gets carried back up just barely with this very rudimentary, like our system, like very basic system to lifting it up, and it barely lifts it. And I had a lot of fun with that, and for me that was a kind of that started to be a more of a recurring theme. I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. We can go back to those. Like the figure 8 balls that you saw earlier, but then there's moon on the roller coaster, and here's a little clip of me trying to figure out to do the same thing with as the figure 8, but then vertically, which I thought would be more exciting to me to build something like this. And this got really exciting because these balls are really heavy, and then this kind of shows how we work. Is sort of when I work on these projects together, and that's him right in the middle of the frame now. And we just start building the machines and start testing them, and then at one point you cut out a circle or a half a circle, and then you start testing it, and this was great fun with throwing and catching bowling balls. You know, again, materiality. And, so yeah, where do we go? Oh man, it's a little bit jungle because I'm looking at the time. I'm already going to skip ahead a little bit more. I love. So I really like things to be scary. I love scary stuff, and then I realized, wow, every time I try to make something scary, it kind of turns out somewhat funny or endearing, or so I decided I just wanted to make something that's just very cheerful and very happy. And that's when I started getting into these pom-pom machines. So it's like these giant pom-poms, kind of like a cheerleader, just bouncing around. As you can, like we saw in the video here, where it's just, you know, this is about 2 meters in diameter, on 3 axis, on compressed, or what do you call it, on an air compressor with pneumatics, just left, right, up and down. Really fun machines to make. So I started making more of those. I'm going to skip over the phantom limbs. This is like the horror aspect and the physicality, like you know, they become very helpless, funny, pathetic. I want to skip over to those because I want to talk about the roller coaster aspect, where I did the graduation piece in Pittsburgh, and in building that thing and really building something that was at the maximum of my physical abilities, where this sphere is the same size, the same weight as me. I could just lift this and push it up onto a track, and and then the modular building technique I used in the roller coaster, in the very small, relatively small, it was 8 meters in diameter, I think. So then came up with the idea to build a roller coaster, but then not a roller coaster for people, but for artworks. And then I invited a bunch of artists to make sculptures to go down the roller coaster. And of course, telling them, oh, look, if you, or originally, I don't think I told them their artworks were going to go on a roller coaster, just to make sure that, or I wanted them to be okay with their artworks possibly breaking. And this was much taller than me. You can see, like, each segment, each cross is 1.5 meters tall. So this goes up to, was it it's like 6-7 meters tall, slope going up, and about 70 meters of track. And I developed a system where each element, like each A-frame, slots into another one, and so you can easily take this apart and build it into a different configuration. A lot of this stuff is on my website, with more pictures, so you can see the actual structure. And it's a fairly simple system, as roller coasters are fairly simple. It's got a motor up there that pulls the chain and pulls the carts up. And I really like coming up with very simple solutions to very simple problems. So the track is made out of plumbing, what do you call it? Water pipes that run underneath underneath the streets. And Zorro came up with this really ingenious set of brakes, which is just the heads of brooms that really just slow down all the carts, because all the carts have different weights. All the sculptures are different. To minivans, arms holding eggs, loudspeakers, jerry cans, so a bucket of taxidermy dogs. So after the initial roller coaster, that turned out to be such a fun show with so many people seeing it. It was at W139, which is an art space right in the center of Amsterdam. So it actually has a lot of tourists come by. So it had a lot of people see it, and obviously a lot of people post stuff on Instagram nowadays, and then someone from Japan here saw it, sent it to their friends in Japan, and I got invited to build one in Japan. So here's a video of as I'm still building it and figuring it out how to do it. So this is like one of the first tests where it still fails, or finally starts to work. And with that, I build these roller coasters kind of intuitively. I figure out how to, or how much space I have in the space, and that was one of the things that was really tough in Japan because it was only like a 3-meter tall ceiling, or 3.5 meters, so I could only have a 3-meter tall roller coaster and a 50-centimeter artwork. But it was 80 meters long, this track, so it was nuts to make all these turns and twists, and then it had to go over itself so it could pass underneath. And this was a really wonderful challenge to tackle. So it's like I start building. I have some sketches, but it really is like you start building, you start figuring it out. If it doesn't work, you modify it, and that's what's great about this modular system, because you can just take a piece out, it drops however many centimeters you need it to drop, and then you can test it again. So it's fairly flexible, fairly quick. I'll skip back to another piece because it's one of my favorite pieces, which is very small. And it is what it is. It's it's an automated whoopee cushion. So this January, this show opened, which was in The Hague, and this is the second to last show I'm doing that has a roller coaster in it. And this is the first time I did a loop, and now I've done it all. I only want to do it one more time, and that's it. I'm done with roller coasters. But more importantly is maybe the piece that was downstairs, which is the biggest piece I've ever done, and very, very, very physical. And that comes from that month I got to spend in Japan to build that roller coaster, where I love visiting local festivals, and I love seeing how people celebrate their different things in their, wherever they are. And one of the things I loved about the Japanese way of celebrating it is incredibly communal, and everybody's in on it, and it's usually big, and you got a lot of people moving things. And I took certain elements from that, where I wanted to have something really big and all kinetic, all moving, and have it be like a festival with a lot of people, but then without the people in it. So this is 10 meters tall, roughly. Or 20, no wait, 20 meters, no, it's 10 meters and by 10 tall by 20 by 20. So it's this maze where you can get lost in, and all these red walls are shaking around you in this, it's convulsing, and it's like dancing around you. So that was one of the pieces I really, really wanted to show. Let's start a discussion.
Have you got a little clip of the noise? Because it's quite intense. I remember seeing a clip Jonathan sent me when he was there. Don't worry if you don't.
I don't right now. No, I
Okay.
should have. But I can maybe
okay.
describe the sound to you, because it has these plaster ornaments at the four corners, at the tops of these towers, and it's in this old electricity factory. So it's this massive building, and it's built out of these steel beams, and it's just these ornaments just bashing themselves into the steel. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with oh man, what's this movie? Tetsuo 2, Body Hammer, this weird live action anime from the 90s, which has this really like industrial soundtrack to it. It's just like that one.
I'm sure we've got a mixed room. I don't know all of our attendees this afternoon, but we've got a mixture of practitioners, of artists, of people working in theatre, of technicians. We've got metal workers like yourself,
Right.
and I wonder whether talking from, because we've talked in our previous conversation, we talked a lot about materiality and the performative nature of material, and even just in the short run of seeing your work, we can see how performance plays a really key part, and also with your popular culture references. Could you just unpack a little bit more about how they work together and how you see, I guess, where sculpture sits within a whole spectrum of performance and theatrics, and how they inform each other?
Uh, yes. Wow, that's a really broad question and maybe tough to answer. Um, I, I, oof, I don't know. I am a somewhat shy person, or I used to be really, really shy. Um, and but at the same time, I really, really like the idea of performance. I really like the idea of being on stage, and I like that whole idea of performing. And it's one of the things that I've always struggled with. And for me, sculpture maybe almost became a placeholder of my body as a sculptor. I just let the sculpture perform for me, where it's because I always also one of the things I really struggle with in like my early on, I did a lot more performative things myself, where I used my body as the piece. Um, but I always struggle with like finding a proper ending to whatever performance it is, and that's one of the things I've always really hated about, I don't know, performance in art school, where it's like somebody's doing this thing and all of a sudden they finish doing the thing and they just freeze and look around uncomfortably, maybe take a bow and then just say, and then just walk off, and everybody kind of claps and go like, was that it? So that's one of the things I always struggle with, where it's like, yeah, but you want to have I just get awkward in those situations. So I just wanted to have, I guess I wanted to build these machines that could do the performance without me and could just do them indefinitely or until the machine breaks.
And
So
the body is like super central, isn't it? Like we can just see that even the pieces are quite embodied in some senses. And you're I alluded to the fact that you work in very within the education sector. You play a lot of different roles in that.
yeah,
Could you talk through, like, what it is to teach embodied making in some senses, or what does the workshop look like for you? What's the relationship between your role as a maker and your role as an educator, and how they work together?
I really, really like um, teaching people skills, to be honest. So for me, it's really, really important that people pick up skills, or students pick up skills, so they can actually do the things they want to do, that they have in their minds. And I feel very fortunate at the Rietveld, at the art school here in Amsterdam. I have this weird double role where I've been a metal shop tech for the last, I want to say, 4 years. Um, and recent years, like for the last year and a half, I've been asked by the head of the design lab, which is the industrial design department of Volta, to um, come teach a class there. So I have the opportunity to like, I got to get to pick which days I teach, and because the metal shop is always on Tuesdays, so I teach a class on either on Monday, where it's just in their studios, but I also have the possibility to just open up the metal shop on Wednesday, as it's usually just closed on Wednesdays. So I can take that group of people that I would see on Monday, I can just take them into the metal shop and really just give them hands-on building experience, or like teach them how to weld. And when I did the business degree in Pittsburgh, where I met John, Jonathan and I collaborated with Pat Olesko. She's a New York artist, performer, and we started doing these soapbox derbies, these building race cars, and not just, and it wasn't who could ever build the fastest car, but it was mostly like the loudest, or the most obnoxious, or the most beautiful. So it had a huge performative element to it, and you're building a vehicle to your body, and I just loved doing that, and I wanted to take that whole idea and bring it in my teaching here. Like the first time I was teaching class, I was like, I'm going to make it easy on myself. I want to do a race. I know how to do that. So for me, it was great because then you have all these students who've never really welded anything before, and you're making them build a vehicle that they have to trust. So they have to trust their own skills. They have to trust whatever they're making, whatever they're welding. They're going to be on top of that hill, and they're they're going to have to go down that hill. And it was really, it's just, to me, that's just really fun, where they, a lot of like shaking knees of these young artists going like, oh no, now I have to get in my own vehicle and race down the hill. I mean, and what I love about this is that I can be part of it. I built like a couple of cars myself. I fell on my ass really hard, got a good, what do you call it, road rash. So I'm also like just encouraging these students, like, look, I can be a very, like, I'm very large. I've got a big beard. I work in the metal shop. I can be a very intimidating appearance, but I'm like, look, I'm also just a kid. I'm just, I'm building stuff and having fun, and I want you to have that same joy in building. So I'm doing what you're doing. I'm falling on my ass. You can fall on your ass. It's all good,
It's also worth noting that the title. What is the title of the course that you teach?
Oh, it's called Ready, Set, Fail. Because I think like the importance of failing is and failing again and failing again and again is super important, because I think a lot of like young artists or students are so kind of obsessed with making artworks. They go like, oh, I made this, and it's like it's now it's a holy artifact that you can't change it or you can't get destroyed. And it's kind of like when Jonathan and I taught together in Pittsburgh, where we did a class called Drop It Like It's Hot, where we specifically had students make artworks just to throw off a bridge. And that was just great, because it took away this whole idea of like everything I make is precious. And I like, yeah.
I wondered, we've been working, well, we worked a little bit with our second year theatre guys before lockdown in around the concept of making spaces being as much of a rehearsal space as a stage or rehearsal studios. So this idea that you can, think through making or think or design through making, and I think there's a little bit about this ready set fail in terms of the rehearsal being part of the work. There's trial and error.
Right.
And I just, Alistair just put in the chat there about what's your failure to success rate. And I think that's an interesting concept, because I wonder how you view success, because actually some of the failures are as much interesting, I should imagine. I'm thinking.
Oh, absolutely. And for me, it's there's always a question like when is a sculpture done, or when is an art piece finished? And I think like a lot of the artworks that, especially with kinetic sculpture, like it never stops to fail. Like it always breaks down, and it's always like there's always something that wears out or wears down. So yeah, like the moment when a failure turns out to be a success that's a wonderful moment. So it's my failure to success rate. I mean, it's all 100% success, or it's all 100% failure.
But that says something about your relationship to making and your relationship to material,
I think so. And I think that to me that's really important. That it's. I mean, one of the things that I would hate to say is that like a piece is done when you reach the deadline, or when it's sold to whoever. Because I don't like that idea very much. I think like these artworks should just continue to develop. And I'm having moved around quite a bit, I'm never really afraid to like destroy my sculptures or leave them behind and or use them for parts. So I make large sculptures, so you can't really. There's always like this whole problem of storage. But like, getting back to the whole like the failing and making, like that's how I build the roller coasters, where it's I don't know how to build these things. I have no idea. I just, you just start somewhere, and you realize, okay, I'm going to need a hill. It needs to go fast. Um, and I think one of my favorite points of critique I had, I think after the first roller coaster show, I read an article online or on a roller coaster forum of all these roller coaster enthusiasts had seen it like, through an article in a newspaper, and they all hated it, which I thought was amazing because they're like, oh, you have that much height and you only do that with it. You could have done this, and you could have done a loop, and you could have done so there's all these people who know how to do it, and it's me just like figuring out slowly with baby steps how it works.
I think that relates to a question we had earlier, where you said you want to do it one more time and then you think you're done with the roller coaster. I think, how do you know when you're done? Like, is it that you've achieved everything, or you've learned everything you want to know?
Well,
And how does that material learning like factor into your work?
well, in this case, like it's also where I want my work to go. It's one of those. It's one of those things where when we just graduated, Zorro and I, and we built this cotton candy machine, and then for months or for like a year, you're that cotton candy machine guy, and then you build a chainsaw machine, and then you're that chainsaw machine guy, and then you start building a roller coaster, and I'm that that roller coaster guy, and I don't want to be that roller coaster guy because there's so many more things to do and to build, and it's like I really like that this thing has become successful, which has opened up doors that I'm really happy that they opened. But it's also for me, it's like it kind of became kind of boring because I've done this and I've done it again, and for me, doing a loop was what made it exciting because I'd never done that before, and it had this whole like extra set of risks like that came with it, and like more like technical. But all in all, like it, you know, it's still, don't get me wrong, it's still fun, but it doesn't excite me as much as it did a couple of years ago when I built the first one.
I think you picked up on a really interesting point where you're like, I don't know how to do this. Let's just start.
Yeah,
And
and now
I
I
think
know how
that,
to do it. So
yeah, exactly. And I wonder, Patrick just picked up on there in terms of that personal discovery aspect, and how you pass that on to your students. And I guess as a technician, we're on a discovery with our students as well. And I just wanted to go back to that, like, how do you I think in our previous chat we'd been talking about how you remove barriers to making, and kind of demystify the machine, as it were, to kind of democratize making.
right.
And I just wondered if you could share maybe some examples of that where you've just broken things down, or yeah, even with the Volta show, how did you get that done, in terms of
Oh,
just,
right.
yeah.
Um, I don't know. There's so many aspects to that. I really, like I said before, like I'm big, I'm intimidating. The stereotypical big bearded guy who runs the metal shop. Um, and I'm very aware of what I look like, and I'm very aware of how people can perceive me in that setting. So I try to just make whoever comes through that door, I try to make them really comfortable. I just want them to be themselves. I just want them to be whoever they want to be, and because I'm there to just teach them what they need to, what they want to know, pretty much. And it's really really fun, and it's really what I'll give you an example. Like one of the things is this flamboyantly gay kid comes in, and he's like, I really want to learn how to weld, and as I'm teaching, because you can teach someone how to weld within 30 minutes. You're not good, but then you know the basics, and then practice makes perfect, of course. And this kid, his dad, I think he's from Portugal, and his dad worked in the steel industry, and like super macho, very male macho guy who and it was very obvious that he didn't have a good relationship with his father, probably because of his sexual orientation. I don't know. But it was really amazing to work with this guy and just teach him these skills. And as he's learning it, he kind of got overwhelmed. He was like, holy shit, I finally am starting to understand certain parts about my dad or about my dad's life. And it was a really kind of like a heartwarming moment where it's like, how this, this happens when you're working with steel. And for me, like working with steel and being in a metal shop, it's very zen and it's very meditative. It's slow and you have to be very patient. So whenever I teach welding, I compare it to sewing. I love making inflatables. I love sewing. It's just needle and thread. You're sewing it together, and everybody knows how to sew or understands the concept of sewing. And as soon as you say, I don't know, but I feel like as soon as you say that, like a very what probably more categorized a much more feminine thing, where as soon as that comes out of my mouth, where it's like you know how to sew because I know how to sew. And as soon as you break it down like that, everybody goes like, wow, this is really much more relaxing and less intimidating. Aspect to it. And I don't know, I try to remember everybody's name who comes in there more frequently, because then you kind of also like create some responsibility and accountability, but you also like have a certain respect towards each other, and how you make it like you're a person, I'm a person, we're here to help each other out. And I think that in building the roller coaster is like I often work with students or with volunteers, because it's also like a lot of people will just say like it's like, hey, I heard you're building one of those and I really wanted to help last time, can I come help this time around? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And there's just a lot of volunteers or students that just really want to get the experience. And it's to me it's really like if you got two hands, you can work, you can build stuff, and I don't care like about your skill level. If you just have the right mindset, you can do it. And I was teaching a class with, there's this young woman from Russia, there's this young woman from Italy, and where they have a much different, like much more male, macho dominated society. And they were just kind of blown away that I was like, hey, could you climb up the scaffolding, and I'm gonna lift you this heavy motor with all the wood constraint. And they're like, what? No, what? No, I can't. What? I can't do that. It's like, well, of course you can. Like you come on, all you gotta do is believe in yourself. And so it's
And that was quite interesting, because there was a question earlier, just because you talked quite a lot about, I guess, exploring masculinity and what
right.
it is to be masculine,
Right.
and actually even the violence that's sometimes associated with the macho. There was a question about, how do you relate to your feminine side? And I think we've talked about holding space, and that the almost kind of meditative therapeutic side
Right.
of making environments, and just that of like coming alongside and nurturing students, on things that are quite parallel to making, almost like repairing parental kind of relationships, or challenging gender kind of stereotypes
Yeah.
or barriers. The question was, how do you relate to your feminine side? Do you see it as cut and dried, or is there a way to kind of merge the two?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, yes, merging. I don't. I think I'm merging the two. I mean, yeah. I I don't know. That's a really difficult.
I think it's a tough question.
It's a really tough question. I mean, for me, I'd have to say like, or this is very masculine. This is very feminine, and it maybe sounds stupid, but I just like doing things without like the gender appointed role. Like I enjoy sewing, I enjoy baking, I enjoy cooking, like, and I enjoy welding, and I enjoy weightlifting, and I enjoy I enjoy, I don't know, I don't really enjoy shooting guns, but I have. And it's like, so there's this whole range of, I feel like you know, you only live once. You got to experience like everything you want to experience, and I don't think anyone should like hold back because they go like, oh, I don't want to wear pink shoes because what are the guys gonna say, or you know, or I don't want to.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Sarah's just said she agrees, and who says, you know, what's female and what's male, and I think that's
Yeah,
kind of interesting that we can nurture learning environments that are inclusive, open for all. And I know inclusivity is a big one for you.
absolutely.
Could you share a little bit about like how do you break down barriers? I think you've talked about it a little bit in terms of just working one-to-one with your students, but is there anything like physical that you do, just or signage, or you know, what does your workshop look like?
Oh, the workshop doesn't have any signage and nothing at all, and it's a really interesting mix of colleagues I have, um, and yeah, the colleague I work with, he works on Mondays and Tuesdays during the morning, part of the afternoon, and we have like a little bit of overlap. And he's my size. He's got long blonde hair, but he's like in his early 60s, like a big beard, like a biker guy. He always comes on his motorcycle, and he's very loud. Like born and raised in Amsterdam. He's very you know specific. He's a character, and you know he smokes and he drinks, and so he spends a little bit too much time hanging out outside with students. Um, which I also don't always mind. Um, but um, he also I don't think he builds like flutes. And so we're very I think we're very different in our approach. He's a lot more, how would you call it, more vocal, more aggressive, loud. He will help anybody, but he's definitely more intimidating. But he's like, you know, but he'll get the job done. So like whenever he's loud, I'll be quiet and I'll approach the student differently. Where it's like, hey, you know, more like one on one. It's like, you know, you don't have to talk to that guy. You can also talk to me. And it's like, and between the two of us, we'll figure it out. And you know, I'll make him more accessible by you know, toning it down a little bit. Um, and I think like also by knowing the student's name and asking for their name and just talking to them as if they're a person, you know, it's that really helps. And just, you know, I think spending time is
Hmm.
is what's most important.
I think we've only mentioned the C word once when we were talking about your Volta show being put on hold due to COVID.
Oh,
And I wonder, that's the C word. Um, I wondered if you could talk about in terms of this practice of, you know, holding students and, you know, all these sensibilities of teaching, making practice. What is what is teaching an embodied practice, much which is yours, you know, in a disembodied environment, in the online environment? What is that looking like for you?
oh, it. I want to say it sucks. It's also kind of okay. It's weird. I feel very happy that I got to have this show right before it started, or right when it started. It was the Volta, the show in The Hague, was supposed to be open for 8 weekends, but it was only open for 6 of them. So the last 2 weekends it got canceled because of the pandemic. Um, but luckily that opened up enough doors to keep me going throughout the pandemic, where there's an online platform here in the Netherlands called We Are Public, and they decided to it's like a curated cultural program where you can, if you're a member, you can go to museums or plays or movie theaters. Um, and now you couldn't go anywhere, so they decided to have an online platform and invited makers to build something. So they invited me to make something that would only exist in virtual space, where I could actually, I was already started working on a sculpture. It's like, could you make a video of that and put it online, and we'll give you money? So I'm like, that's like one way of dealing it, but it's not ideal. It saves a lot of like stress of having to go to a location and build up but it's also less fun. And now, in the last 2 months, I think the metal shop has opened up again just for graduating students. It works surprisingly well, where you can get a lot more work done with that small amount of students, because you can actually really crank out the work. And a lot of these graduating students already know what they want and how to do it, so it's like you don't have to excessively help them. Just get them started, and they'll just go and they crank out the work. So that part is really good. But one of the things I really value about the workshop is that you can just wander in and ask questions and say, like, hey, I want to build this, how do I do this? And that aspect is kind of like has disappeared now. So I wonder how that's going to change, if that's going to change again in September when the next semester starts, if we're going to have that like aspect back or not, or if we can figure out something to have like an outside like session of like an hour every week where you can come ask your questions. But then also, like, I don't know, there's a lot of figuring out with the COVID situation still.
Yeah, I think that's where we're at currently. Lots of problem solving. We've got some questions that I'd like to just do a swell sweep and try and cover them, mostly from my technical team, because I can see that they're super inspired. So from Patrick, it's how did you get into making your sculptures move? Did you always play around with motors and eventually incorporate them into structures, or did you start with structures and then make them move?
I started with structures, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh man, yeah, I think so. A lot of my things come from our movie inspired or cinema inspired, like these practical effects kind of thing. And when I started art school, like after my first year, my father passed away to cancer. And that really, like the whole year after that, obviously art school is this whole therapy session. So I built a lot of like sculptures that had to do with like the body decaying and stuff like that, because I experienced it so up close. So I think the first kinetic sculpture I built was this giant, like a giant robot made out of like that was kneeling down, and it was like so steel legs. One of the feet had like a fabric foot on it, and then the torso, the upper part of the body, including the arms, was all this fabric, like skin-like fabric that covered the whole thing. And it had a motor in its belly, and every once in a while, a motor in a motion sensor. And every once in a while, the whole thing would just convulse and roll with its eyes. And that was the first thing where I go like, oh wow, this is really, I can make large things and I can make them move. And it was super simple. I didn't know anything about anything. I just learned how to weld. And I think it was mostly when I became friends with Zorro, that because he was really into motors, that I it started to go from there. I was like, oh wow, we can really fairly easily motorize these things, and he had a lot more experience in motors. So he's also still my go-to guy if I can't figure it out. I'm just gonna, and since we share a studio, it works out really well. And I still feel like I'm a complete amateur sometimes, where I'm still like, okay, I need a motor, I need a frequency modulator, and then doing the wires, and it's like it's awful, but I'm getting slowly but surely I'm getting better.
I think that kind of relates to just thinking about when you were talking about you want the sculpture to perform for you. Nick Bailey was just asking, do you find yourself repairing and maintaining the work while it's exhibited, and do you count that as part of the performance or part of the work in some shape or form?
Initially, yes. Like especially with the Concam machine, it had to be refilled, so we dressed up, and it was like a whole thing, and people just could come and talk to us. But over time, or more and more, I really want the work to speak for itself. But then again, like for the big show in The Hague, it was kind of like one of the what do you call it, stipulations of doing the show, that I'd be present to not only do maintenance but also just to be able to talk with visitors. And that's part of their deal. They always have the artist there as like a winter workshop where you can come and actually see how something is made. And I really, really enjoyed it. Because you can have like these kind of conversations one-on-one with people next to your work, and people can really ask these questions and point out things like, so how does that work, and who made this, or how do you design this? And I really, really thought that was great and very valuable to like share those things in a more intimate way.
Yeah, and it comes back to that relationship with people, isn't it? And kind of holding people, holding the viewer and the audience, and like, you know, thinking about that
Yeah.
interaction. Just Jonathan, I was wondering whether we've missed anything, or if you want to just draw out any points, soon as you're quite close to Oscar and his work.
Well, I know he's definitely underselling and undershowing. Oscar does so many other activities just for fun that he might not consider art, but that have a massive impact on the work that he does. When we first had the discussion before this talk, we talked about how Oscar says yes to everything when it comes to friends.
Oh, right.
And so Oscar also has some bit parts in films. He has a lot of his image is used for a lot of like advertising and photography. But I think what was brilliant about Oscar is that I learned to say yes to more things, because there was a real benefit in engaging with things that were just slightly outside your normal practice, and that you would benefit so much from them, and not only benefit from them, but you could incorporate them into your practice. Another question that Dick Straker asked earlier was, do you still have all your fingers? And I answered that question and I said, yes, he does, but he's got a lot of scars with a lot of good stories.
Yeah, that's true.
And so one of my favorite quotes from Oscar is from his uncle, and he got a scar in the back of his neck in an accident, and his uncle said, well, if you're gonna be dumb, you got to be tough. And I think about that a lot, because Oscar and I talk about I think both of us take being ridiculous really seriously, and I think we go all in, and sometimes we have to trust our dumb ideas, and that's what makes them really good. But also that's also what brings us into risky situations and leaves us with maybe scars, physical or emotional or whatever they may be. But yeah, it was interesting sharing a studio with Oscar for 3 years. I did on occasion fear for my life.
No.
From the work that you produced. I remember hiding behind a pillar documenting that baseball bat machine, hoping that I wouldn't get hit. Someone else mentioned an interesting comment, which is about documentation.
Right.
Right. And I wonder about that too, because I think you are a little less precious about documentation, and maybe intentionally so. I know that you like to keep things from viewers a little bit. Do you want to talk about that a little bit more?
What do you mean keep things from viewers?
Well, how do you feel about documentation? Like, do you feel it is an adequate way for your work to continue existing?
No.
Yeah.
I mean, yes and no. I mean, like, first and foremost, I want you to experience my work in person, because it is a very, very different experience, obviously, than looking at a screen. Because it is overwhelming. It is large. It's what it's the experience I want you to have, and I don't want you to have the experience of sitting down and looking at a screen. I want you to be like in the thick of it, and I want you to feel that sense of danger, or that weird simulated violence. I want you to be in this fabric cave, and I want you to and that's the thing you can't get from documentation. That said, like I'm really, really, really bad at documenting, and especially like there's a lot of like older pieces that are either not documented or documented poorly. also, you know, because we started making things before you had an iPhone with a good camera in it. So it's like it was a hassle to make good documentation. And it's, you know, so I've gotten better at it over time. Now that I can just, you know, take my phone out and shoot video of things. But it's definitely like I've been asked or told at a number of occasions to kind of if I could just make videos of how I make the things and like put them on YouTube. But I don't think I don't see myself as a YouTuber or as a like necessarily wanting to have my work exist in that way. Like where I think for me really it is about the experiencing the sculpture live.
Just want to say thanks to everyone in the room. A massive thanks to Oscar. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time and just meeting with us and sharing your work. We've got a huge amount of appreciation for you, and we'd love to keep working with you in some shape or form.
Thank you very much for having me.
So thanks to my moderators, and thanks to Jonathan for joining us. That was amazing just having you on our panel today.
And thank you, Ash. Ash, you are a brilliant moderator. You stayed chill the whole time, and you do a super job. And I think these guest sessions are brilliant as well. Since we're in a thank you and congratulatory mode, I think we definitely owe you one.
Wherever we can hold space for each other, the better.
Yeah.
So let's continue. But thanks, everyone.